Hi there, it's your girl Brenda, and you know November is National Caregivers Month, and I want to share my story with you. So, get comfortable, sit back or lay back in your chair, and close your eyes, because I want to take you on the journey of a lifetime. The title of my story is Caregiving 101. Here we go. I am the oldest of my mother's 3 children. My first recollection of having to become intimately involved in my mother's health was when her first homemaker called me. She frantically explained to me that I needed to come and take my mother to the hospital as she was in severe pain. I immediately began the 45-minute drive from my house, and once I got there, the 3 of us left for the hospital. Her homemaker stayed at the hospital until she was released, and this was the first encounter and best experience that I ever had with a homemaker. After the homemaker relocated to another state, I had to take over the duties that she had performed for my mother. Duties like taking her to the bank, grocery shopping, doctor appointments, etc. Her primary care physician was located another 30 minutes from her home, and there were regularly scheduled appointments with other specialists. Our days together began with me arriving at her house 3 hours before the appointment, driving to it, eating lunch, going shopping, and watching her favorite game show, Wheel of Fortune, at 6:30 p.m. After several years, it became apparent that I could no longer keep up the pace of traveling so far so many times a month. Something had to change. I knew what it was and fought with myself as to how I was going to be able to do it. Before I could make that decision, my mother had a stroke, which affected the right side of her body, her speech, and short-term memory. During her recovery at my house, she had home health services from a nurse, physical therapist, and vocational therapist. An unforeseen consequence of the stroke was striking nerve pain in her foot. After returning to her apartment, I came to the conclusion that it was no longer safe for my mother to live by herself in an apartment that was 45 minutes away from me. But how was I going to break it to her? Before I could come up with the answer, I got a call from one of her neighbors, informing me that she had walked to the store to go to the ATM and play her lottery. When she got back to the apartment, she couldn't get in because she didn't take the keys with her. So she went to the neighbor's house. Once she settled down, she realized that she had the money that she withdrew from the ATM, but she left her ATM card at the store. That sequence of events scared me so much that I began searching for a new apartment that was close to me. I didn't tell her until I picked up an application for a senior housing apartment. There was a waiting list, and I was told that it would probably take about a year before her name rose to the top. She was glad to hear that, so she didn't fill it out. I did. My mother had always been independent and valued driving wherever she wanted, whenever she wanted, until the day she left my sister's house to come to my house. That one particular night, she couldn't recognize my house and drove past it several times. After calming her down and thanking God that she was safe, I said to myself that she no longer needed to drive. It's not safe for her to continue to do so. But as fate would have it, one day she had a slight fender bender in the parking lot of a store. She decided on her own that she no longer wanted to drive. Just to make sure she didn't change her mind, I convinced her to sell her car. Once she gave up her transportation, my visits became more frequent as she could no longer go where she wanted, when she wanted. In the meantime, I got the call that her name had risen to the top of the waiting list, and she needed to come and view the facility to decide which vacant apartment on what floor she wanted. She only had 2 weeks to make up her mind and move into it. Her response to me was, "I am not moving out of my apartment." The date was scheduled for a tour of the facility. We went for the next week and a half, and every time I spoke with her, she said nothing about moving. You see, since I was her landlord, she felt that I would never make her move. In fact, that's what her neighbor told me she said. I knew I was in for a battle. I ordered a moving van, recruited movers, acquired supplies, equipment, and showed up on the morning of the move. She had not packed a thing. We had to pack, travel, and move everything into her new apartment no later than 4 p.m. that day. She was going from 7 rooms of furniture to 3 rooms and a storage bin. We made it, and she never forgave me. Now that she had a new residence, it was time to move her to new healthcare providers. Her primary care physician had referred her to 2 different podiatrists. She chose one. Due to the structure of her foot prior to the stroke and the unforeseen nerve pain and shifting of her toes after the stroke, he recommended surgery. Recovery from surgery was worse than the surgery, and follow-up visits were many. Picture this. I drove to her building and parked in the visitor section at the far end of the parking lot. Went up to her apartment and helped her get dressed, as she had to wear a surgery boot. She couldn't really walk because her toes had been broken and had temporary pins in them, which were supposed to help them heal. Once dressed, I made sure that she ate and took her medicine. Before we left, I gathered everything she was taking with her and took it to my car. I came back to the apartment, sat her in a secretary's chair that had arms and wheels on it because she didn't want to use a wheelchair. I navigated the chair while it rolled from side to side down the hallway and made sure that it didn't bump into anything. We took the elevator down to the first floor, went through 2 doors, and I parked the car outside the entry door. Next, I walked to the car, pulled up to the sidewalk, rolled the secretary's chair to the car, and maneuvered her into the passenger seat. After she was comfortably seated in the car, I took the chair back to the apartment, drove to the podiatrist's office, parked the car, went into the office to retrieve a wheelchair, and brought her into the building for her appointment. When the visit was over and we returned to the apartment, I drove up to the sidewalk, parked, retrieved the chair, maneuvered through the hallways, took her into the apartment, went to the car and parked in the lot, gathered her things, walked back to the building, and made sure that she ate before I left. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. Once it was no longer necessary to continue with the visits, I looked back on it and was able to laugh about how silly we must have looked. However, while I was in the midst of it, it wasn't funny at all. Finally, we found a new primary care physician close to home that we loved. She was thorough and spent a lot of time with her patients. Both of us were very comfortable with her. After my mother's foot healed and she had to have physical therapy, she had to walk with a cane to help her regain her stride. The toes that had the pins in them could no longer move. This was her new normal, and she was not happy with it. However, she had gotten so comfortable with the new physician that she informed her that she had a pain in her side. The physician felt a little knot and ordered some tests. The knot went away. The next time we saw the doctor, my mother complained she had to urinate several times during the night, which kept her from getting sufficient sleep. Even with treatment by the primary care physician and a urologist, she ultimately had to have surgery. So what's next in my story? Advanced Caregiving 601. That's my topic for today. Till next time. Bye-bye for now.